Hi, everyone. I'm Parker McMullen Bushman, co-founder of Inclusive Guide.
And I'm Crystal Egli, the other co-founder of the Inclusive Guide.
So Parker and Crystal, thank you so much for being here. When my friend Andrea told me about the Inclusive Guide, the digital green book, I was like, my eyes bugged out of my head. I'm like, why hasn't someone done this before? And this is so needed. And your mission is so incredible because it's not just for people to find safe, inclusive places to do business, but also to change where the money goes, where the money goes. So I wanted to ask, when did you first have the idea? When did you first go, this is not something from, was the original Green Book the 30s? I forgot, 1929?
Yeah, so the original Green Book was published from 1936 to 66-ish, okay. So about a 30-year span. And the original Green Book was a listing of safe and welcoming spaces for Black motorists. So as Black motorists, or as Black Americans started working in factories, and they got out of, slavery and sharecropping and things like that didn't help anybody accumulate any amount of disposable income, they started being able to afford cars, and they started being allowed to travel, even though it was now legal to travel while Black, which used to be illegal at one point. Now it was technically legal, but not everybody was welcoming of that, right? So as Black folks started being able to afford cars, having jobs where they were able to have vacation time, have weekends, they started traveling, but rest of the country wasn't used to that. So it was pretty dangerous. And there were literal signs, but there's also unspoken rules about Black travelers that really could really run into harm if they violated either set of those rules. So there was the Negro Motorist Green Book by Victor H. Green, which was basically a phone book, an address book of safe and welcoming places for Black motorists to stop. It also had some tips and things like that, like bring a driver's cap for men, so they could just say that they were driving the person they worked for's vehicle, right? People wouldn't necessarily believe that they owned the vehicle, things like that. So there's lots of tips in there as well for safety and how to get through these situations. So when I took up hunting a few years ago,
I know, I saw that. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I started going out into rural areas, rural parts of the country, and it wasn't that I was sure everywhere was racist and I'd have a bad time. It was the unknown, right? So a lot of folks don't realize that even though the written rules aren't allowed anymore, you can't have signs that say coloreds only, whites only. A lot of the unwritten rules are still around, right? There's a lot of unwritten rules. Not only that, there's a lot of places that just aren't used to seeing different folks, whatever their identities may be, but especially Black folks with firearms. So I was out there, and it was just that, like, I just didn't know, and this anxiety was just building up. And so far, I've only had positive experiences. But how much more positive could that experience be if I didn't have that anxiety going in? If I could just look up somewhere like, hey, here's some cool places to stop. Hey, avoid these places. This town is actually super welcoming and awesome, in advance, and really be aware of that before I went in, and didn't have to go around on my hunts or any travel with that anxiety, because things have happened and do happen regularly to me, right? So it's not just like a random fear. Like, I've been threatened at knife point. I've been refused service altogether. I have been in gas stations where they serve all the white people first, even though I'm standing right in line, and they wait until everyone clears out. So it's not just a random concern I have because of things I see in the media. These things happen to me regularly.
Right. These are based on your horrible experiences.
Yeah. And they happen to people of color quite regularly. There's a lot of folks that I talk to about this work or about racism or oppression, and they say, yeah, but we're used to it. Like, we just know how to handle that. And I'm like, should we have to get used to this? Like, I don't want to get used to this. So,
it reminds me, because I know you both have worked extensively in the outdoors and environmental education. It reminds me of the attitude around climate change. We should this is just the way it is. This is how it's going to be. We'll just give up,
Oh yeah, like, sort of.
Well, don't, it's very different, but at the same time, as a climate activist, it makes me, there's that level of sadness of let's not accept this.
Yeah, sometimes that can be the case, where it just seems like too big of a problem to address.
Exactly.
I'm only one person, what can I do? But a lot of folks, I'm a millennial and I'm proud of it. People call us snowflakes. And I always say snowflakes make blizzards. So you get enough of us together and we absolutely can do something. And the important part is to not give up, and to keep going. There's a lot of folks that when it comes to racism or oppression based on an identity, it's very personal to talk about these things in a way that other kind of categories for global change kind of like, because the environment really affects us all, right? We can go out and be like, wow, there's smog out and all that stuff. I can go to a city council meeting and talk about pollution or recycling. But when I go out and talk about racial justice, I'm pulling out trauma left and right. When I talk, like, for example, earlier in this discussion, when I said I got threatened by knife point, like my heart started going like that, right? In a way that doesn't really happen when I talk about like recycling. So, yeah, so it really is a very deeply personal, intimate thing to put out in the forefront of your work and your identity, because it is steeped in pain, and not just ours, but generationally, right? So it's so deep and it cuts so much sometimes. To keep going through that takes a lot. It takes a lot. And that is something that honestly, when people aren't like, they're like, I'm just trying to live my life. I'm like, okay, this isn't like, it's really difficult to process. And I'm so grateful to have Parker as somebody who I can do this work with and process at the same time. That is a very unique situation where we can literally have something that's like very emotionally heavy, pretty traumatizing to try to work through. And then afterwards, do download with Parker and we can talk about it. And it's a really important part of this work.
And for taking care of the both of you while you create this digital green book. Parker.
Yes.
I'm sure you have something to add to all of that amazing beginning there that Crystal had.
Yeah. So, Crystal had those experiences and wanted to figure out a solution. And so thought about bringing forth reviving the green book in a way, in a digital form as an online platform. And her original thought was that, we might just have like listings of the safe spaces, because that's what the green book was. And that people could then see that. As she was trying to get that together, she reached out to me first to say, I've got this idea and I just want to bounce this off of someone and kind of hear what your thoughts might be. And I remember when she called me, I was riding home from work. It was late in the year. So, it was dark outside and I was sitting in my driveway listening to her speak about this idea, and it resonated so much with me. I was like, this is so needed, and it's just genius. And then a few weeks later, she reached back out to me and she was like, so I'm gonna do this for real, and do you want to help me? And so we had what I call our inaugural meeting at Doug's Diner, and started to talk about this and what it could be. And together, like, me and Crystal are two very different people, and our brains work differently, but together it's kind of perfection. And Crystal, had these ideas for I think the connection to people and the need. And I brought these ideas that were like connection to business and data gathering, and how we also, because we are a tech company started by two Black women, and how are we going to make money to support this work doing this? So we had lots of conversations, and the idea just grew from there, that instead of just being a listing of safe spaces, we wanted to provide interaction, and people can go on. It is like, a customer review website, but instead of listing if the soup is too cold and my service was slow, people are listing how they feel in a space in relation to their identity. So did I feel safe? Did I feel welcome? Did I feel celebrated?
I love that criteria.
Yeah.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, within these spaces, and it means different things. Like safety is physical safety, but also mental safety, like emotional safety, right? Welcome might be along that customer service review, but we know that it takes different things to make different people feel welcome within a space, right? And then did I feel celebrated is, do I feel that my identity is represented in this space? And I often give the example of going into stores and to buy Black hair care products. And there's like this whole big aisle that's out in the open with hair care products that work well for straighter hair, right? And then the kinkier, curlier 4CB hair products are often behind a pillar in the corner, or sometimes even locked up, right? And when like I look at pictures around the store, do I see pictures of people who look like me, right? Represented in your advertising, in your in-store models, on your end caps. And so do I feel celebrated and seen within a space, like my identity was thought of? And, we're gathering data from users to look at different identity criteria, because we feel like it's not just about race, or it's about race and, right? Because if you look at the intersections of different identities, the original Green Book was for Black folks, but if you look at the intersection of disability and Blackness, or sexual orientation and Blackness, often the people who are most highly affected by systems of oppression are people who live at that intersection. Yeah, so while people with disabilities might have the highest rate of unemployment, Black and brown people with disabilities have a higher rate of unemployment than white folks with disabilities. So, having those conversations about how do we use identity to really see what people's experiences are, and then how do we give businesses feedback? We want to celebrate the businesses that are doing this really well, and we want to provide feedback to businesses that maybe are not doing as well as they would like to. And oftentimes businesses have no way, because you're right, no one is gathering this data.
There's they may not have the either feedback loop, or like just those great examples that you just gave, like where are those hair care products? Where am I represented?
Yeah.
I mean, I can think smaller businesses, large corporations have no excuse, but
yeah. So like businesses getting that feedback to say, oh, I'm looking at my inclusivity score,
Mhm.
and it looks like Asian men love my business.
Mhm.
But when we look at our reviews from white women who are wheelchair users, the score is not as high. And now I can see that. And here's some great information from Inclusive Guide on how you can improve that.
Yeah,
How
that's
can we
brilliant.
work to make things inclusive? And so we're really trying to support this conversation. We're trying to give resources. We're trying to give resources on the user side to find those safe spaces, and resources on the business side so that we can be better.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And I can feel how your two brains came together. Right? I can hear, and that's one of the things that fascinates me as partnerships, is how partnerships work, and talking about being there for each other around the trauma of this creative process and how it can re-traumatize you, remembering the times that you've been threatened or unwelcomed or, felt in danger, but also how your two brains are working to make this so extraordinary.
And I want to add to that, because I love that Crystal brought that up and talked about not only the trauma of talking about this and working through identity, but that also leads into where we are as Black women founders of a tech company, where only 1% of tech companies are founded by Black folks, and they're not funded. When we first got going, we're like, we need to talk to venture capitalists, angel investors, and we had lots of friends who had gone through this, who had done this work, who had successful companies. We're going to do our research and talk to them about how they made it happen. So many of them were like, this is an amazing idea. Like, we got funded off of much less. Like, you've got it pulled together. I want to introduce you to people. And we got into meeting after meeting after meeting where we were not treated the same way as some of the white male tech company founders that we had spoken to. And I think that was a revelation, because we get into the meetings, we're kind of exposing ourselves and having trauma during the meetings where people are questioning, why would that even be needed? And what is this? What is this about? And then going back to those friends who are like, wow, like I had an idea that I wrote on the back of a napkin and got $4 million. I just can't believe that it's flushed out as you do. So having to deal with identity, even as we are creating this, and you look at the demographic reports that are coming out, several companies that have done research around funding have shown that Black companies in general and Black tech companies are only funded at a very small percentage of the rate that white companies are funded at. And so we, are working through that as well. And it's an extra hurdle that we have to get over to kind of get our work going.
That's infuriating. I wonder if there's a publicity opportunity here, though. The little marketing part of my brain is going, who can we shame into giving you a lot of money?
We really want to focus on, when we go into our work, it's very tempting, very tempting to do that.
But you wouldn't that wouldn't be good, and you wouldn't be happy.
Yeah,
you wouldn't be the support you want.
For businesses, we say celebrating the places that celebrate you, because it really is so easy to slide into that mindset and to be like, these people aren't doing this, these people aren't doing that. But what we really want to spend our time and energy on, because I used to do that, like honestly in my life, I used to do that, just call people out, right? But now I find it much more effective to say, yo, here's somebody who's doing it right. Here's the steps that they took. Here's a recipe for you to follow. Now, what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do now that you have the solutions? Check out, Crystal's investment bank, like whatever, right? She's doing it right. Here are the steps. here it is on a silver platter. Now what? Now ball's in your court, right? And so that honestly, again, in my life, I'm not perfect. No, never was, never going to be. I always tell people I'm getting close, but that's a joke, right? Like nobody is perfect. There's no such thing. But what we can do is share how other people that are doing it the right ways, or doing it in efficient ways or effective ways. What did they do so you can get to that next step? And so for me, I had to really humble myself, because it feels so good to take out a magical sword and vanquish the dragon, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so for investors, we'd really love to see an example of folks that are doing it really well, folks who are literally putting their money where their mouth is, because that's what our model is for businesses that we are serving is, hey, we're not perfect. We're not perfect either, but look at these ones that are doing it really well. Here's things you can do. And so taking that and putting it into the investor world is a vision I see for the future. And then once we do make it to the point where maybe Parker and I are investors, maybe we'll be that change, right? Hopefully someday we can roll over our success and help be that difference, and that's one of my personal goals, is to pay it forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I thanks for busting me on that, because I do go to the dragon that I want to slay the bad guys. And it's exhausting and it's counterproductive. And one of the things that I think people have been really looking for in, white people trying to become better allies and overcome our own internal racism is models like this. Like this is very, like, how much more straightforward can you get? Do your business this way, go do business here, support it's so clear and it's so brilliant. And it's so, it's just a great idea. I'm very excited about it. I wish I was a angel investor.
We wish you were too.
And that's, really what, when we say we want to shift the economy toward inclusion, like, we're going to be honest, individual donors is how we've gotten really to where we are right now. We haven't had any, like investment funds or large venture capitalists give us money, but we've had people give money on GoFundMe. We've had one individual who gave us a large sum of money and said, we're not we don't want anything back. We're not investing as a VC, but we want this to happen. So we're going to give you some money. And it's been individuals. And we're actually planning right now a big fundraising event for December to try and figure out our funding for the next year and have someone who's going to give us matching. But it's the individuals who really care about this. I think that is going to shift the economy toward inclusion. Like when we have people of color talking about their experiences, people with disabilities, people who are in the LGBTQIA community talking about all of these experiences. And then we have allies that are like, I want to make sure that when I go into a place, right, that they are going to treat Jen the same that they're going to treat Parker. And so I am looking to spend my money in places that are inclusive to everyone, not just me, and going and shopping in those places. We want to celebrate those businesses that are doing it right and put up there for the public to see, this is where you should spend your money. And then we want other organizations to see, oh, there is an economic incentive to being inclusive, because now people have a mechanism for identifying the spaces and spending their money there.
Yeah, it's really it's so crisp and clean and makes such great sense. So I want to ask you a little bit about the creative process. Two questions. The first one is, how are you taking care of yourselves? Because I know, like, you have families and you have.
Did you see the laughter? Like.
Okay, whichever one of you wants to answer first. Maybe the answer is not.
So for folks that was audio only, Parker and I were both on mute as we laughed our butts off.
There was lots of laughter
Of
there.
ourselves. I have a therapist I see regularly and medication. No.
Yeah.
But for real, it is very, very taxing. It is exhausting. It is stressful. It is all consuming. And then one of the things I found is it's incredibly hard to get away from. So every time I go to a socially distanced, fully vaccinated dinner party, I feel like you always have to give those like,
yeah, exactly.
right, during COVID, you always have to say like, we were 3 feet away from each other. We didn't.
Oh my God, I do the same thing.
They were like spit guards. Anyway, so anytime I share what I do, everybody always says, what do you do? Who do you work for? That's a very important question in our culture for some reason. I start telling them about the website, and one of two things happens. Either people start asking why it's a need, and then I go into trying to convince them that racism and oppression is real, which is very exhausting, or they're just genuinely super interested in it and want to know more, which in theory is a really, really amazing thing. But again, even if it's positive, still tapping into trauma because I'm trying to solve a problem that I have on a daily basis because of something I can't change about myself, right? And so then you have all different types of reactions to it. There's white fragility reaction. There's like, inappropriate reactions. There's people who don't want to educate themselves and just Google it or go to our website and learn everything that I would say anyway. They want to know my why. They want to know all this stuff. And so even when it's really well-intentioned and I'm like super stoked to talk about it, sometimes I just want to be at a dinner party, right? I want to ask you questions. I want to get to know other people. So it's this like catch-22 of being so excited about my work, so proud of it, that I want to share it with everyone. But then when it comes to decompress time, if it's with other folks, I can't really get away from it because everyone is genuinely super interested, and I can't complain about that.
I get it.
Too much because that's so wonderful. But it's just something that you don't really get away from unless you literally go out of cell phone service. So that's one of the wonderful and challenging things about being in this work is talking about it with others constantly, absolutely constantly.
Yeah, I get that. And I can understand that.
I have a couple of different ways that I try and cope with things. And one is, I love getting outdoors when I have the opportunity to. So going for walks. I had a great schedule, which now my assistant is working on helping me get back into, where I took a daily walk, and that helped me just to get away from the computer. Also my networks. So I just have some amazing people that I've been able to surround myself with, including Crystal. I think me and Crystal lean on each other a lot, just to kind of talk through things and vent, right? So it's something that I think could be like a real benefit, like starting a business with like someone who's also your best friend, but can be, sometimes that's a true benefit. Sometimes it's a little like infuriating. I think it depends on the day with us, but we support one another, and we have a network of friends that we talk with and that help support us. And then I think another way that helps me cope, which I don't know if this is actually healthy or not, but I am a planner, right? And I find myself when I have something to plan for in the future, a delayed thing that is happening, and I can take breaks to think about the detail for that thing and how amazing that thing might be, whatever it is, like that helps me when I have a lot of stress in the moment. So I plan, getaways with my husband. And we've actually got one coming up this month, but that like helps me.
The research is really clear that looking forward to those kinds of things is positive. It's really positive. So that's great self-care.
One of the hilarious things that points out the difference between me and Parker is that terrifies me and brings so much stress into my life. I had a friend invite me to go impromptu camping over the weekend. And so I was like, sure. And then I was like, I had to take a Zoom call, right? So I'm on a Zoom with Parker while I'm halfway to this camp area. Parker's like, where are you going? And I was like, oh, I don't actually know. Like, I don't actually know where I'm going. Like, where are we going? Like, I had no idea. I just like got into a truck, like put a sleeping bag and some clothes in there and went. And I'm like halfway there, and like that terrifies Parker, right? So it's one of those things where, to me, not making decisions and not planning is like my ideal scenario sometimes, because it's hard for me. Like I have to pull so much out to do it for the company. And so that's one of the ways that Parker and I are complete opposites.
I love it.
And when I said earlier that, you know, it's amazing and sometimes infuriating, I think that's the one personality quirk that we've got between the two of us, that we were like, okay, you know. But but in a lot of ways, that also is why we fit together like this.
Well, yeah, good partnerships are not there. You have to bring different strengths and different weaknesses to the table, or it rarely works. And so that was my other question I wanted to ask, which is, how do you divvy up the work? How did you decide that? And how do you decide who gets the shit work that nobody wants to do?
The first thing I highly recommend to anybody is hiring an assistant. Before we hired an assistant, so we share an assistant. Their name is Kit. They're amazing, and Kit changed our lives. Okay, so before we hired Kit, we both felt like we were absolutely drowning. We both had to do our own busy work, our own, I think between us, we have 11 email inboxes. Now it's up to like 12 or 13. And so, now we have somebody else who does that, who like highlights what we need to respond to and can help schedule things. We had so much time where we were literally just scheduling meetings.
Oh God, yes.
But like realized we weren't actually doing anything because we were just scheduling meetings, and both of us were doing that. So I highly recommend that anybody, even if you can only afford somebody for an hour or 2 hours a day to sort through your emails or whatever, you start a business, get somebody to go through and do all of that stuff. That was one of the hugest challenges. And then right now, Parker and I are actually in the middle of figuring out, who's focusing on what. So Parker is way better at a lot of things than I am. And I won't say way better, Parker. I will say that way. I have strengths that Parker I'm not better at you than other stuff. So we have.
This is cute, y'all. If you're not watching the video, they're having this cute little exchange, but only one person's talking at a time. So it's very delightful.
Strengths, and Parker and I can both do each other's strengths, but there's a clear efficiency when we tap into our true what comes naturally, right? So Parker is a creative person who can think of big ideas and all that stuff. She's way better at being like, let's make a spreadsheet, right? Parker is way better at that future stuff, and I'm like, oh, we need something tomorrow. Boop 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 boop. Got it, 10 times out of the box, things like that. So it's just, we're still though trying to figure out and be malleable with who is focusing on what. But at this point too, we also need to both know everything, right? So we both need to be in our accounting meetings. We both need to be in our web development meetings. We both need to be in marketing meetings. So we don't have the luxury of truly being able to make strong delineations, because we're so new and we're growing something together, and we truly want it to be we both did this 50-50, right? but we're in the process of finding out like, okay, well, it's much more efficient and enjoyable for Parker to do this, much more efficient and enjoyable for Crystal to do this. Later, we'll like kind of separate those out, but we really do need to both
be there,
be part of everything right now because we're so new.
No, got it. Parker, now I know you're going to say something really nice to Crystal.
Yeah, it's hard because we're in the same room and I'm trying not to cause
talk
feedback.
over.
But Crystal does so many things really, really well. And Crystal brings that, you know, you need, Crystal not only has that vision, but has such a deep heart for people, for the work, right? And so I think Crystal brings that very strongly. She wants everyone to truly feel included, invested, like a part of this, and sees things that I don't see when those things need to happen. And I am definitely much more like, I have a heart, but I can be very analytical, right? And so there's like, let's do this because it's the good and right thing to do. And we balance that with, okay, and then like, what's the money and the return and the other things. And again, that's why we're like puzzle pieces that kind of bring it together.
Awesome. It's so awesome. So I have this question I love to ask people on the last question. And I feel like this is going to be a big question for you both. What do you want to learn next?
Oh my goodness, I have my immediate answer. First of all, Spanish, just because, but
on a personal level.
On a personal level. But one of the big things that we are responsible for is actually something that's really fascinating to me as well. We're going to be collecting a ton of personal information and data on people who experience depression and don't have trust in systems, especially systems designed by literally their oppressors, to manage their data and keep it safe and be responsible and be ethical with what they do with it. We want to utilize data in a broad scope to influence policy decisions at the highest levels. I hope to sit across from Zuckerberg and kick him off across under the table during a congressional hearing or something, because I want to I just want to lead by example. Like, you can make money and do the ethical right things and protect people's privacy, and you don't have to sell their literal identities to the highest bidder in order to just keep accumulating wealth for wealth's sake. So I am really fascinated by studying data ethics and all of that goes into that. It is a lot. The implications, how can you project or guess the implications when for 20 years from now, when we don't even understand what the technology could possibly
we don't know what AI will be. And
right. We have no concept of what computers will be like 20 years from now. At least I don't. So what are the ethical implications of making a decision now, or how we store data now, or how we protect it, or who gets access to it? And where are those lines? And how can you be profitable in that too? And I hope to set a bar with that in this age. I think with the tech companies that exist out there already, it's hard to roll it back, especially when people are already profiting so heavily off of the current models. No one wants to be like, you know what, for a good cause, let's stop making $1 billion. Like, that's not a thing. But we're growing this ourselves, and we're building it ourselves, starting with ones and zeros. So we have the opportunity to, do it ethically. I don't want to say right, because we're probably going to be wrong at some point, but like, to do it with as good intention and as ethically and morally as we can. And that's something I'm really excited to be learning about.
That's absolutely inspiring. I was just saying some very mean things about Zuckerberg before this call. So thank you. That soothed my anger for a moment.
And I think Crystal took a lot of the words out of my mouth, because I was thinking about how to, it's an ongoing learning process of how to create and grow a company that is focused on inclusivity without like selling out, right? And just a conversation I was having with my husband this morning while we were talking about, news channels and how news is set up to feed us the most dismal things. Like we watch pretty progressive news channels, and we were commenting on how surprised we were that there's so many highlights of Trump on the channel still, and how there was this news channels, very progressive news channels, made a lot of their money off of providing an even larger platform to a candidate that they said they did not like. And they did it because it was financially beneficial, even though it was not beneficial for maybe people to hear that, to be exposed to it, to promote that message. And so you end up getting into a feedback loop of doing what it gives you the most money, even when it's not the most beneficial to the public that you're trying to serve. And how do we, so I've been thinking about that this morning and ongoing, and how as a company, do we not fall into those pitfalls of being focused? Because it would be super beneficial, probably where we're going to hit is where there is that inflammation maybe not the right word, but around people who are doing it the wrong way, and giving focus on, which it'll be on there because we need to know what are not the safe spaces, but to risk promoting those spaces, because that is where we get the most views, the most engagement, rather than promoting and putting forth the people who are doing the work the best way, because we want, that is what's beneficial to people. So how do we do the things that are beneficial to people ongoing, and how do we build a company around that? And how do we more than ever stick with this? Like I learned a statistic last week about the amount of companies that are that we have that are successful today that were started by Black women who were bought out, and then they placed a white male as the figurehead, and then it took off. And so how do we stay true to ourselves, true to our company, not sell out and let it become something else? I want to learn how to do that, because I don't have all the answers right now, right? But I know it's the vision in the future that I want to see.
You both are so inspiring. I am really almost in tears from this conversation. So thank you both, not only for the vision of your company and how you're working together, but for everything you just said in that last answer. It's so clear to me that your inner work as humans has allowed you to form this vision of your company. And I'm really inspired by it. And I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And we'll be sure to share the GoFundMe link and shout this out loud and many times. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting us on. It's been a real pleasure. We really just appreciate you and your platform, and extending your platform to us as well. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful pleasure and a great conversation.